So I did like probably half of a video about this book, Breast and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. And then I found out that the video is gone. So I'm re-recording. I'm doing this while I'm getting ready, but I'm like halfway through, which is probably good because I got really distracted. Anyway, to start off, I'm going to go ahead and just read part of the inside cover, but not the whole thing, because today I'm only summarizing book one, just a section of the story. Of course, I got this from my local library, so get yours from your local library. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read through really quickly. Breast and Eggs tells the story of three women, 30-year-old Natsuko, her older sister Makiko, and Makiko's daughter Midoriko. Makiko has breast and... I read too fast. I skipped a whole sentence. Makiko has traveled to Tokyo in search of an affordable breast enhancement procedure. She is accompanied by Midoriko, who has recently grown silent, finding herself unable to voice the vague yet overwhelming pressures associated with growing up. Her silence proves a catalyst for each woman to confront her fears and frustrations. Okay, so that's the first half. There's another good chunk I did not read because I'm taping as I go. The other thing is I can't give a full summary and make too many associations as far as like literary devices and symbolism and such, because I read the whole thing, right? So some things are super apparent, some things are not. Not yet, anyway. Just a quick review. I did my skincare already. Just used my basic little mini daily palette because I didn't want to get on my big palettes and do like a whole thing. Just didn't feel like it. Yeah, so basically, one thing for me as I was reading this is when I look at generational stories, I'm so used to looking at them as like grandmother, mother, daughter. And for me, I had to really remind myself, like, no, it's two sisters, and then they grew up, and then their daughter. So as the story's taking place, it's the two adult women for book one. Everything I'm saying is in relation to book one, not the complete story. So for book one, it's two adult women, flashbacks to their childhood, but mostly present day women, right? And Midoriko, basically the daughter of one woman, niece of the other woman, they're present day, right? That's how the story is told. And we mostly get the information from the thoughts of present day Natsuko and through diary entries of Midoriko, who is 12. And again, present day, right? At least as you're reading, it's present day. So a couple of things. And I'll just start by giving some basic background information about Makiko, who is sometimes called Maki or Maki. I'm not 100% sure on pronunciations, I'm going to be honest. I looked them up, but I'm not a native speaker, so, if anyone is, feel free to let me know. So basically, when Natsuko and Makiko were growing up, they lived with their mother and father to start. Their father was kind of like, they talk about living on eggshells around him. He wasn't amazing, to say the least. He had some issues. I could be misremembering, but I think one of his issues is like his drinking. But he wasn't like around for much of book one. So yeah. Anyway, in the one night, and of course I have my trusty little broken mirror I've had since high school, because if it works, it works. In the night, the mother of Makiko and Natsuko takes the girls to run away to their grandmother's house, Komi. And the four ladies live together, and and they live there. And that is their upbringing. Their mother died young. I believe she was 40 when she died. And then at that point, their grandmother, Komi, was their predominant caregiver. However, she also died, I believe, pretty young for her age as well. And all of this is taking place in, I believe, Osaka, Japan. Now, when we're looking, those are like the flashbacks of their childhood. When we're looking at their present day, it's in Tokyo, where Natsuko lives, because she is hosting Makiko and Midoriko as they're on a trip. So, basically, then the girls are young, but they're taking care of themselves. And Natsuko is the older sister. And I believe she lied about her age to start working early. And because she was older, that's the only reason they were able to have the sisters stay together and not be taken by the system. I'm going to do my bottom lashes. Of course, I'm going to have to make a face to do that. Okay. Sorry, I can't multitask. I'm not the most graceful person, but that's okay. Okay. Good enough. Okay. So she is helping take care of her. And I believe later on, Makiko also lies about her age and starts working early as well. Can't quite recall. I made notes, but I'm trying to do this like quickly because I feel like my last videos were super long. So I'm trying to get to the point, right? Which is hard for me. I tend to go on and on. Anyway, so the girls grow up and Natsuko decides to go to school. She wants to be a published writer and she moves to Tokyo to try to get some writing published. She wants to write a book and get it published. So she goes to school and lives in Tokyo, right? And Makiko stays in Osaka and she works as a hostess at like a club / bar kind of situation. It's like a club with like, my understanding is there's karaoke, or if there's not karaoke, there happens to be a lot of singing. I'm pretty sure it's karaoke, right? And she's a hostess there. So the hostess's role there isn't like, it like means something different than typical hostessing where I live. Where I live, a hostess is somebody who just like sets you at your table and then it's like, peace out, they don't see you again the rest of the evening. But in this book, the hostess is someone who is basically like, they entertain you, they keep you company, they continually bring you like drinks and like they hang out with like the men there, right? But it's not like a prostitute, it's just a companion, right? It's just like a pretty woman it's like basically having a hot waitress is my understanding. But there's like more social aspects to it. And again, this could be something that I need to do more cultural research on because I don't really know, right? But that's my takeaway, is that it's basically a beautiful woman who like keeps the party vibes going and like brings the drinks and like that kind of thing. And occasionally drinks with the customers as well, but if they don't drink with the customers, they like have tea, right? That way they're still participating, but they're not like getting drunk at work because you're working. And so basically she works there, but the club is like struggling financially. The owner is like getting older and they're having a hard time because of like the area it's in. And, it's just an area where there's not a ton of money is my understanding. So it's kind of hard for the business to keep going and like, but it's like everyone at the business really cares about each other and tries to support each other is my understanding. There's like a sisterhood among the women there. And that's pretty cool. And I find that that's true in a lot of service, at least food service and entertainment industries in general. So that's really nice. And then, lower lashes. Gotta make the face again. So she's there. And then Midoriko in this, there we go. Midoriko in this story is, I think, no, I know. She's 12 years old in this present day story, right? So she is, you know, at that age where like puberty's coming at you like a brick wall, and it's weird and it's rough, and everyone has different feelings. And for her, she like sees some people excited for these changes, but she is like, I don't want to change. I don't want boys to look at me differently. She's like, I don't want to feel like a stranger in my body, not have control over my body. The other thing that's hard for her, and this goes into the conflict between her and her mother, Makiko, is that she only associates children and childbirth with negativity, right? So this is kind of a double conflict thing. This is where we're going to get into Midoriko not speaking. So Makiko and she wants breast enhancement surgery, right? She's not confident in her chest. She, one thing she talks about is how like she's tried like nipple bleaching and things like that, and how it doesn't really work and things like that. And that's where we get into some harmful Western beauty standards as well, right? Is like skin bleaching in general is pretty, you know, it's harsh, and also like mentally it's not good. Like physically we know all the reasons it's not good, but like perpetuating that there's one beauty standard is not a good thing. But also like skin bleaching in general on less sensitive skin is not good. So like a nipple is a sensitive area. That's, yeah. So she's talked about how she's tried that, and she's basically been like looking for doctors to do consultations for a breast exam, and she's doing all these things. And her sister Natsuko basically says like anytime they talk on the phone, somehow it's not even a conversation between the two women, really. It's really just Makiko like saying her thoughts out loud essentially about her breast. And Natsuko's like, in her head, she's like, well, I think she's getting older. She should be saving for like when she's old and can't work. But she's also like, who am I to tell her that, right? Like, and I don't quite know her finances. So it's kind of like that. So she's like, I want to be supportive. And she's like, well, who am I to say what people can't do with their money and their body? But the reason that, now we're going back to so that's like that. But now I'm going back to Midoriko, Makiko's daughter. The whole time her mom is doing all this research and having all these phone conversations and calling all these clinics, she's basically explaining she's not happy with her breast after having a child due to like the hormonal changes, the changes with breastfeeding, things like that. And also like Makiko and Midoriko struggle financially. So for Midoriko, she's like, it's a kid, it's just a bill. She's like, I feel like my mom regrets having me. I feel like my mom blames me for her her lack of satisfaction with her body. And she basically has decided she never wants kids. And she wants to drop out of school and start working to help her mom financially. And she's carrying all this guilt. And, you know, she feels like if her mom's not happy with her body, like, how is she going to be happy with her own, right? So, and that's something that is pretty universal. Like from women, we're taught as a young age indirectly, right? Well, usually indirectly, that, you know, we see our moms criticizing their bodies. Like, first off, we see it in the TV, we see it on newspapers, like not newspapers, but magazines. Like we see it in media in general, but then we see our moms doing it. And while our moms are people, so it's not like they're trying to make us feel bad, but like if we look at our moms and we see them as beautiful, confident women, and then they are saying there's things they don't like about themselves, it's like, well, what about me? Like, I'm your child. Maybe I have similar features to you because we're genetically related, or maybe they're similar because it's something most women have, right? So it's like, well, if you don't like it on you, how am I supposed to like it on me? And then also, if you're criticizing that on yourself, you probably think I'm ugly. Or not ugly, but like, you know what I mean? Because like, I know I've seen women in my family complain about things, like if they complain about their weight or something. and I weighed more than them. I was like, well, they must think I'm, you know, also, you know, not meeting a standard. And that puts pressure when you're young. And that, not that anyone tried to do that to me, but that was something I internalized and I felt. And I feel like a lot of young girls do the same thing, right? So it's hard. It's hard being a woman too, because it's hard for women to, you know, face their own body struggles and then try to make sure their kids don't struggle. It's hard for everyone all around. People are people, right? So yeah, so it's just a hard situation. I'm not demonizing Makiko for those conversations, because, you know, it's what happens. Yeah, those conversations happen. So Midoriko, and Midoriko and her mom basically got into a fight. And in the fight, Midoriko said to Makiko, her mom, she was like, I'm never going to talk to you again. And so for like a year, she hadn't. But she was able to speak at school and things like that. And here's the thing. She wasn't completely ignoring her mom. Like, she would communicate to her mom through writing in a notebook. She had one journal, which was private for her thoughts, right? Like a typical teenage diary. And then she had a notebook that was for communication, which she did most of her writing in. And so, yeah, so that's how, so my thing is, I started to wonder about associations between trauma and select mutism. And I don't know really much about anything related to select mutism. I don't know how it works. I don't know if there's connections to trauma. I don't even know if the technical term is select mutism anymore. So I don't know, right? But like, the fact she is making some effort to communicate with her mother and not totally ignoring her. And later in the book, she does verbally communicate with her mom, and it seems like it's physically hard for her. And so it makes me wonder what is going on there, because the adults tend to view it as a choice. And Midoriko herself did say, I'm not going to speak to you, right? So that makes it seem like it's a choice, which select mutism is not a choice. It's something that someone needs help to work through. So I'm not quite sure, right? I don't know enough. It's interesting. And so I want to look into that further. But basically, the first night, I'm trying to decide if I want to do foundation or not. I want to do blush. I think I'm just going to do blush on my bare face. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you can't do that. You need foundation before blush. I don't care. That was loud. This is the color Papaya. So basically what happens is we're getting the story predominantly from Natsuko's perspective. So she lives in Tokyo, and Midoriko and Makiko are coming to visit her. And they're coming to visit her in Tokyo for a few days. Oh, that looks really red. But you know, with blush, it fades. So it'll fade. So they come to visit her for a few days, partially to visit, but also partially because Makiko has decided she is going to go to a consultation to a particular clinic in Tokyo for her breast enhancement procedure. She's decided for sure she's getting it done. She is going to get it. I should have done foundation. It's okay. It's okay. When it fades, it will look better. She has decided officially she is going to get the procedure done. And so I have so much stuff laying around. So she is visiting them, and it's summer. And so the first night they're just hanging out. They basically, at one point, they go to like a Chinese restaurant in, the area. I believe they got dim sum, but I don't remember. But they got their meal. Everything was going. I'm just cleaning up all my stuff. Everything was good. They got their meal, etc. And they got their meal. And then another night, actually, I think it was that same night. I can't quite recall. But Maki and Natsuko are just drinking, having fun, being sisters, right? Another night, they go to the hot baths. Not all of them. It was just, my hair is like so unevenly curled. It's naturally this way though, so I don't know. It is what it is. For now, I'm just going to put it back in the clip till I do something with it. But, they go to a hot bath, like a public hot bath kind of deal. And they're there, and Natsuko's just trying to enjoy the vibes, right? She's like, oh, the water's so hot. This is so nice. And her sister starts, like, staring at everyone's nipples. Sorry, I don't know why I, like, grasped myself. But starts staring at everyone's nipples. And, like, that's when she starts to tell her sister about, like, the skin bleaching, the this, the that, da, da. And to Makiko's credit, she does do a lot of research to try to find, like, the safest and like best budget friendly and like longest lasting kind of situation. Like, she's not trying to just go and butcher her body with any procedure, right? Like, she's taking the time to look through it. And like, work itself is not inherently harmful. I just think it's important to have open dialogue with your kids about it, and not like, if you have children and you're getting work done, I feel parents have a higher responsibility or a bigger responsibility to talk about how to do it safely with their kids, and talk about, like, make sure your kids aren't internalizing it, right? Like, just, I think as parents, you have to work harder to make sure that your kids don't inherit your issues, right? Like, that's how I feel. So, nothing wrong with getting things done, but I think as a parent, you have to do a little more to make sure you're being responsible about it, because little eyes are watching you. So, you know, I think the obsession Mieko has with it, and like kind of accidentally, like blaming breastfeeding for her issues and things like that, which breastfeeding does oftentimes change breasts, but like, your kid's right there. Like, she hears you. And if she just sees that she's costing you money and you're unhappy with your body and you're saying it's because you fed her, she's going to make those connections, right? So I know it wasn't on purpose, but again, just little eyes are watching you, little ears are hearing you, right? So she's like, they're at the hot baths. Midoriko's not there at this point, but Makiko is like talking to her sister about all these things. And Natsuko is just like, I don't care. She's like, I don't care. My boobs look kind of like hers. She's like, I can't even remember what my sister's nipples look like. So it's just not a priority for her. And that's fine. And she's like, you know, if my sister wants to get work done, that's cool. Don't think she needs it, but you know, she's going to do her thing. And so, yeah. And so there's also an interesting part of that story where a transgender individual, goes into the hot bath as well. And in reading it, it was interesting because I don't know much about how Japanese hot baths tend to, like, I don't really know the policy around that, right? So it was very interesting to kind of read about that in this book. Like, some of the women were uncomfortable, some didn't care. It was interesting to read about. I think that's kind of an ongoing dialogue in a lot of places in society. So it's just interesting that was included. I'm not quite sure the year. What year was this published? I'm gonna look. What year was this published? Let's see. What year was this published? Da, 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 da. I don't know. I don't know. Wait a minute. Okay, I think it was 2008. I have to double check, but I think it was 2008. Okay, so yeah, so like the way this was written in 2008 is very interesting because in 2025, we kind of have shifting views or more of this. Well, I feel like society's still deciding how it feels about like changing rooms and bathrooms and things like that. But I feel like it's still an ongoing conversation happening. But again, I'm an American living in the United States, and I don't know where this author lived at the time of the publishing of this book, but she is a Japanese woman, and the story takes place in Japan. So I don't know if you heard that. I live by an intersection, so I hope that vehicle's fine. Anyway, so it was just interesting because different cultures have different conversations happening, right? So it was interesting. And then there's one day where Makiko is going in for her consultation. Excuse me. She's going in for her enhancement consultation, and and Natsuko, like, I'm gonna go to Natsuko for a second. Like, there's a night she gets her period, and she's thinking about how, like, she is single, which is fine. Like, she doesn't seem to mind she's single, but she's like, it's, like, lightly suggested, but it doesn't really go into that. She's, like, wondering if she will ever have kids, or if one day, like, all her eggs will just stop falling, like, she'll be out of them. So yeah, so it's just interesting because, and Natsuko hasn't published her book. She's been in Tokyo 12 years, or not 12, 10 years. She's been in Tokyo 10 years, and so she's feeling, like, unhappy in her career, and she feels like the clock's kind of ticking a little bit. She's like, what am I doing? I don't have kids. I don't have my book published. I'm in the same place I've been in 10 years. I don't even have more money to really send home to help Makiko and Midoriko back in Osaka. So a lot of things happening. But anyway, going back to Makiko. So she goes for her breast consultation, and that day, Natsuko takes Midoriko to an amusement park, and they go to a Ferris wheel, and they just have a really nice bonding moment where they're on the Ferris wheel, and Natsuko thinks back to her childhood, and they just kind of have a nice conversation about how when Natsuko was around Midoriko's age, she felt like apartments should be made in the style of Ferris wheels, because apparently the structures are, like, really strong, and they can withstand earthquakes really well. And so I don't know anything about that, but basically that's what she's saying. And it's just interesting because it's cool to think about when you were a kid and the thoughts you had, etc. So that was nice. It was a nice little bonding moment for them. And they bought fireworks because they were like, oh, when Makito gets home, we'll set off the fireworks. It's our last night in town. And she was supposed to be home at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. comes and goes. 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Like, the time is just ticking by, and Natsuko's tried to call her, and the phone's not answering, and she's like, well, if her phone battery died, she could go buy a phone battery, so that's not right. Like, and there's so many people in Tokyo that if she needed help, someone would have surely helped her and gotten in touch with Natsuko by then. So she's realized her sister is not answering because she doesn't want Natsuko to get in touch with her. So that's kind of scary. And so then Natsuko's like, oh my God, was she convinced to get her surgery same day? Like, that wouldn't be like her, and surely, like, no place would do that. So then Natsuko's doing research and finds some places that will in fact do that. However, they are pretty much back home recovering within a few hours, so that doesn't make sense. And also, those clinics were very sketchy, and they weren't like the nicer clinic that Makiko had said she wanted to go to. So she doesn't think that's it. And so they're just waiting and waiting, and it's just not a fun waiting game, right? So then she comes home, and she is plastered, so insanely drunk. And she doesn't even realize as she's walking in the door that her shoes are already off. And she's, like, trying to take her non-existent shoes off her feet. And she's just a mess. And Natsuko thinks, like, oh, she doesn't really know anyone in Tokyo. So like and she really wouldn't get drunk like this with a stranger. So she wonders like, oh God, did she like go see her ex-husband, which she's been no contact with. I don't think Midoriko's even met her father. So, but she's like, you know, she's a grown woman. I can't stop my sister. And if she did see him, I don't want to hear about it. So instead, she just tries to like comfort her. Not comfort her because she doesn't really seem sad, but just try to be like, hey, why don't you take a shower? Da, da, da. You know, all the basics, but also trying not to make a big deal out of it because Midoriko's right there. But also she's like, well, is this an all the time occurrence? Like, is Midoriko used to seeing her mom drunk? So I don't quite remember how it happened, but at one point, Makiko goes up to her daughter and she like kind of gets in her face. I can't remember if she like grabs her chin or something, but she basically goes not to harm her, but to like get in her space, right? And so she's like telling her like, you don't want to speak to me, that's fine, da, 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 da. Like, because she's hurt. Her kid's not been speaking to her for a year. Is that the way you should handle it? No, definitely not. But, you know, again, we are all people. And so that's what happens. And Midoriko slaps her mom in the face. And time kind of freezes for a minute. And Midoriko speaks for the first time in like a year and a half. And she's like, tell me the truth. And her mom, drunk, is laughing at her. And she's like, tell you the truth about what? Da, 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 da. And Midoriko goes into like, tell me, well, I don't want to give all the spoilers away, but basically like all the things she's been feeling about like how everything is awful, how like being a woman is awful, growing up is awful, being alive as a woman is awful, like having her as a daughter is awful, how she wants her mom to say like she doesn't want her as a daughter, just like sad things, right? And I could be misremembering. Read it yourself, right? My lighting keeps changing. That's what I keep adjusting. But just like all the things that have been like consuming her inside, she like says, and as she's doing it, she like grabs some eggs nearby and like smashes an egg into her forehead and starts like cracking eggs over her head as she's like sobbing and speaking. And Makiko starts sobbing and cracking eggs over her own head and basically they basically have like a really healing conversation. A very necessary conversation between a mother and daughter. And then they run out of eggs, and Makiko says to Natsuko, like, hey, no more eggs. And Natsuko's like, they're in the fridge, and hands her the eggs, and they continue to crack the eggs and cry together and really do that necessary healing. And I think it's definitely not a mistake that they're cracking the eggs over themselves. And of course we have our title, Breast and Eggs. And of course we're talking about womanhood, right? So eggs, reproductive health, you know, mother wounds, as they say, like difficulty with relationships with mothers, things like that. So so the symbolism is definitely there. And then after all the eggs are gone, the women clean up the floor, clean up themselves. They don't do the fireworks. And the next day, Natsuko's like, well, can you guys stay one more night? We can do the fireworks. And Makiko's like, no, I have to go to work. And Natsuko's like, okay. And she tells Midoriko, hey, you're welcome to stay. I know it's summer, so you don't have to go back to school for a bit. You're welcome to stay as well. But Midoriko chooses to go home. And in book 2, I'm not going to tell too much because I just started it. And yeah, so I don't quite know. But in book 2, I'm already seeing some really great stuff. And it seems that the relationship between Makiko and Midoriko has healed a lot. And we get to learn more about Natsuko. Like book 1, while it's mostly from Natsuko's perspective, we learn more about the relationship between Midoriko and Makiko, in my opinion, and the upbringing of Makiko and Natsuko. So book 2, we're starting out learning a little more about Natsuko's romantic relationships, and her career, and those sorts of feelings surrounding it. Book 2 starts 8 years later. So at that point, Natsuko would be 38. Yeah, 38. I don't know how old Makiko would be. She's a few years younger than Natsuko. And then Midoriko, who was 12 when we first meet her, is 20 and in her second year of college. So stay tuned for part 2 where we discuss book 2. So yeah.